Perfect.
Get the slides ready to go. Can I just check you can see the slides there?
Not just yet, Sarah.
I can.
Okay, bear with me. How about now?
Yes.
Perfect. Fantastic. Right, I think we'll make a start, and any late arrivals I'll let in as we go. So thank you for joining us today, and thank you to Link Strategic Partners for providing today's session on second chance hiring. I'm going to hand over shortly to Michael Aiken, who is the president of Link Strategic Partners, and thank you for taking the lead on today's session. There is the chat functionality if anybody has got any questions throughout. If they want to post their questions in the chat box, we will cover those towards the end of the session, if not during, and then we have some time at the end for any final Q&A. So I will hand over to Michael. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Sarah. My name is Michael Aiken. Good afternoon to our UK-based audience and those joining from across the pond. Good morning. We're really excited to be here to talk about this. We are new members of this distinguished organization, and we're very excited to be so. We've been so impressed with Kubo and all the work that you're doing, and really looking forward to a strong partnership. So this morning, we have a phenomenal team pulled together to talk about second chance hiring. That may or may not be a term that resonates. It's called different things in all the different places that we work on these issues. So whether it's formerly incarcerated individuals, justice-involved individuals, second chance hiring, this is about those opportunities for employment pathways after people have served time for whatever reason. How do you come out of that and make sure there's a completely productive pathway to employment and empowerment after that? And we've got some phenomenal models put together here between the UK and the US that we look forward to unpacking. Very happy for this to be interactive and looking forward to some questions along the way. So if we go to the next slide here, I'll just give you 2 quick seconds on Link Strategic Partners. We're a social impact consulting firm. We have offices in the US and the UK. Our UK offices are in Manchester, headed by Matt and Poppy, who are on the screen here today. Why am I showing this slide? So at Link, we believe very much in living the values that we work with our clients on. Our youngest employee is 16, our oldest employee is 95. We have every generation intentionally represented. About 65% of our team identify as women and over 70% as people of color. In the communities where we operate, we hire from within those communities. Second chance hiring is an absolutely key part of that. We've been so proud to be partners with the Georgetown Pivot Program, which we'll hear about in just a little bit, which is a great partnership with the distinguished Georgetown University and the city of Washington, D.C. We're very proud to be doing work with our great friends at Skill Mill. So we try and live the values of the work we do, and second chance hiring has been an absolutely core part of making sure not only that we stay connected to the issues that we care about, but that we have a pipeline for phenomenal talent, which is ultimately what this is. And so we'll go into that a little bit more, but we have 4 phenomenal case studies today that we're going to be walking through, and we'll leave lots of time for Q&A. So if we go to the next slide here, I will bring in Professor Lovegrove from Georgetown University to talk about the Pivot Program, which I would really hold up as one of the most innovative and kind of groundbreaking town gown type partnerships that I've seen. It leverages the incredible resources, academic resources of Georgetown University, and an absolute need and commitment from the city of Washington, D.C. into a pretty remarkable program. So with that, Professor Lovegrove, take it away.
Thank you, Michael. That's a great introduction. As Michael was starting to say, the Georgetown Pivot Program is a university-based professional development and transitional employment program designed specifically for people coming back into the community after incarceration. We refer to them as returning citizens. Sarah, actually, let's go to the next slide. I think before I get into too much about the program itself, I just want to establish the context. And this may be news to people or maybe not, but it's pretty well known that the United States has the highest rate of incarceration of any country in the world, any developed or emerging country in the world, both on a per capita and on an absolute basis. And as it happens, Washington, D.C., even within the United States, sticks out as having an extremely high per capita rate of incarceration. So this is an issue that's been top of mind in the city of DC for some time. It's also, by way of context, there is, although this is not entirely the reason we do it, there is inevitably a very strong racial justice dimension to this. It is also well known that in the US, the criminal justice system disproportionately impacts people of color at every stage, likelihood of arrest, likelihood of conviction, length of sentence, all sorts of issues. So that is the context that we are operating within. Sarah, maybe could you go to the next slide? I think the good news is that incarceration rates are beginning to fall. This is now an issue that people are talking about. It's been recognized that we have over-incarcerated. We've used incarceration as a blunt tool, and it's created more problems than it has solved. That's the good news. One of the consequences of that is that we have more and more people coming back into the community every year, and those people obviously face a whole variety of challenges upon reentry. Housing, financial security, employment obviously being top of mind. And, it probably is no surprise that employment rates for people who've been incarcerated are substantially lower than the rest of the population. So in a place like Washington, D.C., where typically the rates of employment, even in times of recession, are well in excess of 90% citywide. Rates of employment for people with a conviction a year after they've returned to the community are typically well below 50%. So it's employment is a big challenge. Why don't we go to the next slide, Sarah? So that was the context within which we established Pivot. And Pivot, as I said, is a professional development, and it's a very unusual kind of transitional employment program. It is based at Georgetown at the university. We do get very substantial support from the DC Department of Employment Services. The program lasts for a full academic year. So there's a portion of it which is very much classroom based. It has we go through the fundamentals of business and entrepreneurship, but we also, it's not entirely a business curriculum. We do want to make sure that that our fellows are getting a good, solid academic foundation, that they have a range of skills that will be valuable to them in a variety of employment settings. One of the most unusual features of the program is that the participants, essentially it's a job for them for the 10 months that they're with us. They're actually paid a stipend, an hourly wage, which is funded by the DC Department of Employment Services and topped up to a living wage by Georgetown and our donors. But it's a job for them, but their job is to go to school. The first part of the program, the first, I guess 6 months or so, is entirely classroom based. The second phase of the program, we actually partner with different organizations like Link and others in Washington. And our fellows are full-time interns in those organizations. They come back to us just 1 day a week for programming. The rest of the time, they're out in the community, they're getting work experience, and they're allowing employers to see it up close, to start to see people with a conviction not as a category, but as human beings with talent and potential. And that in itself has enormous impact. In terms of our kind of impact at this stage, we literally this week started our 6th cohort, so we've completed 5 years of the program. As of last summer, we had 66 individuals who completed the program. That's an 85% or just over 80% completion rate of the people who we initially admitted. I haven't talked much about this, but it is, as you might expect, a highly selective program. We receive applications every year over the summer. We go through a very extensive interview process, primarily to identify people who are really prepared. It's a big commitment. It's a pretty intensive program, and we're looking for people who really are fired up and ready to go. And as it happens, you'll hear from a couple of our graduates a little later in this same program. So I think that'll bring to life what I'm talking about here. We have very strong post-program employment outcomes. Typically, well over 90, almost 100% of our graduates are able to find employment upon leaving the program. We have 13 fellows who've launched ventures of their own, and we've developed, I think this is perhaps the thing I'm most proud of, really good relationships with more than 50 organizations, employment partners and internship partners, who are now thinking of second chance hiring as an integral part of their talent strategies. Sarah, why don't we do the next slide? So I've told you a bit about the program. This is a little bit more of an understanding of what we do. Our goal really is to make sure our graduates are prepared for whatever may come their way. We see them as potential leaders in the community. We aren't preparing people for any particular type of employment. You know, there are some more specialized programs looking at careers, maybe in IT or, you know, in different sectors where we're more generalists. But we are looking for people who can problem solve, who understand the basic components of business, who have the communication skills, the professional skills to thrive in most employment settings. You know, people who are goal oriented, and you know, I'll talk a little bit more about this, but people who will also bring others with them on the journey. I mean, fundamentally, that's what we're trying to do: is prepare a group of individuals to be leaders within the community. Sarah, you want to? This gives you a little bit of a window into the employment partners I was just talking about. And as I said, really our mission is twofold. We're obviously trying to create opportunities for the individuals who attend the program, our fellows. But we really are trying to challenge the sort of traditional practices and perceptions that employers may have about people with convictions, and to see them as individuals. And so this gives you a sense. It's a very diverse group of organizations we partnered with: small companies, large companies, nonprofits, government agencies. And we do that on purpose. This is not something that is specific to one kind of employer. This really is something we need to think about more fundamentally. So building an employer pipeline. We have partners who are willing to work with us. We often every year we recruit new partners on purpose. We want the pool of partners to grow. Sarah, let's go on. This is just a snapshot of some of the graduates of our program, and gives you a sense of the kinds of opportunities. Now, not everybody ends up in these kinds of roles, but you know, we're really quite proud of you know, especially now because we've got a few classes now that have completed the program, and we can see what their journey has been since then. We have actually a few that are now part of our team at Georgetown. We have people in C-suites. Victoria on the right there is actually one of the key members of the diversity, equity, and inclusion team at Dick's Sporting Goods, a large retailer here in the U.S. Mimi is the founder of her own cosmetics company. Tony, you're going to hear from a little later today, so I'll let him introduce himself. But Talib has been working in the mayor's office on the community engagement front for the last few years. Antonio actually works inside the prison system now. He's an engagement manager for American Prison Data Systems, which is one of the big telecom providers inside prisons and jails all across the U.S. So this just gives you an idea of the kinds of opportunities we're able to create. And you know, one of the really nice things, and it's hard to show it on a slide, is that we're now at a place where we have graduates who are able to create opportunities for new fellows coming up that are hiring fellows, I mean, and into their organizations, and really trying to help us create this platform, these opportunities. And that's probably the most gratifying aspect of the work that we do. Sarah? Yeah, so you know, I think I'll leave it there. I know there are some questions. I think we're going to leave the questions to the end, but you know, I think just to sum up, you know, what programs like this, I think it's vitally important that universities and institutions of higher education are behind this. That gives it a kind of credibility that I think perhaps, you know, when we're in conversations like this, I think there are some other service providers in and around the district that are envious of us just for that. Of course, also in a business school, we have relationships with organizations in the community. That's a great asset. You know, but this, I guess the thought I'd like to leave you with is this is something that doesn't simply benefit the individuals in our program. This really is a force for positive change within the community, and really everyone benefits. I think I'll leave it there. I'm happy to take questions a little later in the program.
Thank you, Professor. Very much appreciate that. We'll come back to this question, but the question is around pre-assessment and what that candidate screening process looks like. So we'll come back to that.
Okay.
One other thing I'll mention is Link and myself, we've been very proud recently to work with Professor Lovegrove and a great team on the formation of something called the Second Chance Hiring Alliance. And it's an alliance of employers in the DC region to open up dialogue about what it takes on the employer side. There's often a sense that it takes very large employers with very structured programs. And in the US, we find that the majority of the hiring takes place in small and mid-sized businesses, which are often left out of these discussions. So we've created an alliance to bring business owners together to talk about how to create more pathways. And that's been a really important part of it. Our next speaker and case study here is Joe Houston in WeFit DC. Joe will introduce himself and his program, but proud grad of the Pivot program who went on to create a nonprofit and then also created a for-profit business that is meeting an absolute need in the city of Washington, DC. And on the side, he was on that little show called American Ninja Warrior. So Joe Houston, can I turn it over to you, my friend?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Michael, for the introduction. Again, my name is Joe Houston Jr. I also go by Mr. WeFit. I'm a proud Pivot alum, cohort 4. Let's go. Yeah, Dr. Lovegrove said a lot of great things. But how I started WeFit DC, I'm the president and founder of WeFit DC, a for-profit. Also the president of my nonprofit, WeFit University. But a little bit about my for-profit, how I started this was back in 2020, the pandemic happened. You know, nobody in the world knew what was going on. The world was just shaking. So what I realized that a lot of the gyms was shutting down and nobody really had an opportunity to get fit and get well. So Ward 7 and 8, that's like some of the heavy underserved areas in Washington, D.C. with a lot of poverty, a lot of people with a lot of health disparities, didn't really have that access. So they was dying by numbers, high blood pressure, diabetes. So I basically had a conversation with other individuals that was incarcerated, that was certified trainers, and that they loved what they was doing. And I was like, look, I want to do these workouts in these different communities. And they was all on board. And the first event we did was in about May 2020. And we had over 100 people came out to our first ever event. I had Martha's Table donating me fresh fruits and produce. We had a DJ out there, and some of the council member came out there. It was really huge. And from that moment, I was like, wow, I got something special going on here. And from that, we was just going every weekend. I wanted to do something every weekend to be consistent for our community. Then it came out to twice a week, and it became out we doing 3 events a week. Then next thing you know, I realized that I had a business going on because people wanted to pay me to come to these different communities to do fitness activations. And I ended up being so let's say 70 activations later, I became featured in Men's Health magazine, a magazine I used to read when I was incarcerated. And I know I left that part out. I was incarcerated for 5 years, went in when I was 16 years old, came home when I was 21. So I've been home almost 10 years now. I was just turned 30 last month. I know I don't look it, but I'm just grateful for WeFit really showed me that I can create anything. It really put me in a situation where I was like, wow, this is literally just an idea that I had in my head and I executed it and I put the paperwork behind it. And there was a lot of hiccups during the past and my process going through the Pivot program and Dr. Lovegrove being on my neck, just making sure that my module and it making sense and my audience and who I'm actually going after to serve. And that's how basically I got here. But we can go to the next slide. So currently, we served over 70,000 residents and counting from doing all these activations and also networking and continue to build different partnerships with different organizations that would like to work with us as well. It's just been a movement that actually saving lives. The testimonials, people walking better, and it's just general fitness levels. We're not out there trying to get people to do backflips and things like that. We just want to work with people at all levels to get them moving. That's the goal, just to get moving. We just want to promote physical activity. Next slide. So currently in June, I just opened the first ever fitness studio in Ward 8. That's the underserved area in Washington, D.C. that was highly overlooked. So we never had a fitness studio in Ward 8. And Ward 8 hosts almost 80,000 residents. And I'm just so happy and proud to be leading that movement, to just be helping so people can have a home to just come and get fit. So now we're running like the operation as a gym model, a small studio where we run classes. We also I just got spin bikes in 2 weeks ago. So we got spin classes going on. We got boxing boot camp going on, functional training. All my trainers are full of life. And also a lot of my trainers, I would say about 95% of my trainers are returning citizens as well, certified trainers as well. So we're doing a lot of great things. We're growing step by step, a lot of learning lessons as well. And I also just want to shout out to doing that Georgetown, to go back a little bit, doing my Georgetown pivot. I interned with Link Strategic Partners. Michael and Poppy, they brought me on the team, and I just been a part of the family ever since. And I just been learning a lot from Michael and Poppy as well, and also Matt. So that's basically it. So what I'm doing now is just just working as a young business owner, continue to learning, and just trying to grow my model.
Appreciate that, Joe. I went to the opening of Joe's gym dressed like this, and Joe said there is no reason you cannot lift weights in a suit, and he had me working out that day, which was great. Joe also recently hosted the Vice President of the United States in his gym when she did an event at this organization. So Joe is rocking it on every level, and remember the name, because we'll see big things from Joe, and we're so proud to be part of that family. So thank you, Joe. We're now going to jump back across the pond to the UK and bring in our friends from the Skill Mill. Really phenomenal model that Davey will talk to us about, and then we'll go from there. David, take it away.
Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you very much for the invitation to be here today. It's great to hear all about Joe's work as well as Professor Lovegrove. Interestingly, President Biden announced just last week that October is Youth Justice Action Month, so it's really quite timely that we're having this session here today. So the Skill Mill is a social enterprise. My background is in criminal justice. I've worked in criminal justice forever, and spent far too long in courts, police stations, and prisons, and talking to young people about a whole range of stuff. But the one thing that kind of struck me over all the years working with kids is the really kind of strong sense of them wanting to work. Actually, dropping out of school early, having no interest in education, multiple barriers to learning. But actually, when you ask them if they would like to work, most of these kids would say, yes, I would work tomorrow if you had a job. So back in 2013, I decided that we would give that a go, set up an organization to provide jobs directly for kids coming through the system. We called it the Skill Mill. It was established as a social enterprise. In that way, it was delivering impact. So really, it was all about impact. It wasn't really about having a sensible business model. Over time, we've hopefully got there. We've been running Skill Mill now for 10 years, so it's kind of well established. The young people are all aged 16 to 18. They're all young people who have been in the system the longest, so that we talk about them, define them as the top 10%. So that's young people who have been in secure estate, who've been involved in committed at least 10, 11 previous offences. So that's our target group. We provide them with a job for 6 months. The work is primarily around environmental maintenance or construction. And delivering those services to the community. So we have customers who are large construction firms, local government departments, community organizations, a whole range of people who are interested in buying our services. We're also supported nationally through a contract with government where we get rewarded or we get paid for outcomes that we achieve. Which is interesting, quite complicated, but it helps keep the wolves from the door. So the combination of being paid for outcomes and generating income from sales, makes this work financially. The impact is it's just so huge on in so many different levels. We measure lots of very obvious things like reoffending rates. qualifications achieved, participation in the program, and transition into further employment and training at the end. But we also measure a lot of the kind of softer stuff, you know, the really less tangible stuff. We try to capture that all the time through discussions with the young people. So we get better learning of the, you know, what it is about this intervention that's making it work so well. Maybe the next slide, Sarah. So yeah, this is our theory of change. I mean, it's really it's a very simple model, actually. It's a team of 4 young people who are supervised by someone who is seconded from the Youth Justice Service. They go out and deliver services to the community. And through that process, they're learning, obviously, a lot of employability, getting a lot of employability skills, learning practical skills. They're, you know, developing awareness around health and safety, obviously, working as part of a team. They're getting paid, so they're, you know, becoming financially independent. And yeah, they're working for a customer, so it's a proper job, right? It's really as simple as that. And the identity shift that's taken place is really significant for us. So we've got young people who come to us without having any understanding about the norms of work. And by the end of the 6 months, there's a complete transformation. So they're, you know, they're coming to work every day. They're following instructions. They're really keen to learn, and they're really keen to enter the labour market at the end. And you know, and that's where we get our impact. Next slide, Sarah. So yeah, there's just some. So there's, as you can see, it's work which is very much outdoors. We do a lot of work in the environment. There's lots of contact with nature, and that has its own benefits in terms of the mental health and physical health of the young people that are involved. This lad in the middle is holding up his CSCS card, I believe, which is the construction industry requirement for working on building sites, and that's really important in terms of the transition out of a skill mill. So maybe most of the young people that we work with have got very little interest in education or learning. Well, obviously, we feel it's incumbent upon us to introduce that, and eventually young people understand and appreciate the importance of having certification, having qualifications, etc. And they're getting very practical skills. And we capture all this evidence, and we use that to do just like Professor Lovegrove said, to promote the positive stuff that's going on, and trying to change the mindset of other employers around young people that are in the system. Next slide, please. And here's where we are at the moment. So we're across England. We have teams from the very north of England and Northumberland all the way down to Brighton on the south coast. We're working in London, major urban areas, and we're working in quite rural places like Norfolk and Northumberland and County Durham. So the complexion of the work kind of changes according to the place, but essentially it's very, you know, it's for young people who are interested and motivated to work, and we provide them with that opportunity through practical activities. This doesn't reflect the demand for Skill Mill. The demand is actually massive, and we're doing a lot of work now to see how we can scale this program across England, and actually also piloting a program in Washington DC. So we'll bookend this National Month of Youth Action Month with an event in Washington DC, which we're also really looking forward to. And final slide, I think, or is this the last one? Final slide. So this is the impact we're having. It's actually slightly changed. We've employed 398 young people so far. The reoffending rate has gone up by 1, so it's, you know, it's still under 8% reoffending rate, which is incredible, considering that if you look at the top 10%, the young people who are in the system with 11 or more previous convictions, the reconviction rate is 72% within 1 year. So it's working, and it's working really well. We also are slightly short of the 75% target in terms of progression into employment, education, and training. We're doing a lot of work right now with partners to try and improve that and try to get all the young people through the program into positive outcomes in terms of their engagement with the wider labour market. There's loads of information online about us if you want to have a look. We're on the internet, and we're on social media, and welcome your comments. Just drop us a line. There's an email address for Andy Peden, my colleague, who'd be very happy to hear from you, or just reach out to us however you feel fit. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Davey. I've seen these slides before, but I'm always so impressed with the program, and the stats right there at the end really speak for themselves. I'm glad to see this growing. So we have one more speaker, and then we'll take any questions. So feel free to drop them in the chat. I'm going to bring in my friend Tony here with the National League of Cities. The National League of Cities is a national organization that brings together city leaders from across the U.S. for problem solving, innovation, etc. And Tony is one of the best they got there. So Tony, I'm turning it over to you, my friend.
Like Professor Lovegrove says, great introduction. Thank you, Michael. Good afternoon and good morning to everyone. My name is Tony McCright, and I'm currently a program manager at the National League of Cities on the Justice Initiatives team. And I've been there about 2 years. We could change the slide at any time. And just very quickly, a little bit about what we do, about what I do on the Justice Initiatives team. We do what we call technical assistance, which is basically, like Michael said, helping cities implement innovative programs. And then we also have what we call peer learning networks, which is almost like affinity groups. We bring in, well, I should say, my affinity group is the reentry network, where we bring in reentry leaders from across the country, from the city administrations, and also from higher ed and a few community-based organizations. And I am not ashamed to say I stole that model from the Georgetown Pivot program. It's been in effect for about 1.5 years, and it has grown exponentially very quickly. And we just recently had our second in-person convening, where leaders from across the country came in. Professor Lovegrove came and spoke, talking about the pivot model. And so we'll get into a little bit about how all that kind of connects. But our work is grant funded, and I'll tell a little bit about the story I got there. You can change the slide. And so I'm sorry, you can go back. Sorry. So I was in the second cohort for the Georgetown Pivot program in 2020. It was the pandemic year, so our year got kind of disrupted. In the middle of a session, we were just told to go home, and the rest of the year was virtual. But the benefit for me was that I was able to do 2 internships as part of the academic year. And then while at my second internship, which turned into a part-time job, NLC reached out to Georgetown Pivot looking for fellows. And my fellowship there for 8 months turned into a staff position. And so I've been there a total of 2.5 years, I think. And one of the great things, and I won't even get into the details, Joe and Professor Lovegrove have covered everything about Pivot. I don't think I can add anything to what they've said. But one of the great things about the Pivot program is the access to the Georgetown network. And I think it's instrumental just to have that opportunity for people, whether you're at the University of Georgetown, University of Warwick, and you have a program like this, to make sure that the fellows or students have access. And that was instrumental for me because I had access to people who would probably never pick up the phone for me had I not said, hey, I'm part of the Georgetown Pivot program. Or if Professor Lovegrove would email someone, or my boss at my second internship was a Georgetown grad, and he called the former Secretary of the Treasury or Deputy Secretary of the Treasury and told him I wanted to speak to him, and he picked up the phone. That would never happen without that access that Georgetown Pivot provided. The other great thing is that, as Professor Lovegrove said, they're starting the 6th year. And so with that, the Pivot program alum now have our own network. It's allowed us to create opportunities, as she said, where we can bring others in. So one of the things I mess with Michael and Poppy about is we compete over Georgetown Fellows now at NLC. We've and as a matter of fact, Joe, we interviewed Joe for his internship, and he ended up going to Lynx. I have no hard feelings against any of them for that, but I tell them all the time it was a great fit for Joe. Like when we lose out to Lynx, which has happened 2 or 3 times now. I just talking to Poppy about this yesterday. We've lost at least 3 fellows who chose Lynx over NLC. It's actually a better fit. Like we've never lost someone and said, "Hey, we think they should have come here." And so that's another great thing. It's gone from Professor Lovegrove having to reach out to the business community now saying, "Hey, we've heard about this program. Can we get in? Can we get some of these fellows here at our institutions or organizations?" And that's just a wonderful thing. But it helps us build our network where Joe can hire, as he said, formerly incarcerated people. Right now, I have 3 former Georgetown Pivot fellows on my staff doing internships. And so it allows us to create our own network in the DC area, but also nationally. And so I think that's the important part. One of the important things that the Georgetown Pivot has provided in such a short period of time. When you think about it, 5 cohorts is not a very long time to make such a deep impact in this community. And so I want to get in part of the Georgetown Pivot program, as Professor went over, we have an entrepreneurial track, and then also some people get jobs. So I did both. And we can go to the next slide now. And so there was a pitch competition during our 10-month program at Pivot, and I did not pitch my own business at the time. I helped a fellow with his, but after leaving the Pivot program, something that was not on my radar at the time was I started a LLC called BLTN Collective, Better Late Than Never, and our mission is to create increased home ownership in low-income communities and with people of color. And so with my model, what I do is, you can go to the next slide, is I allow people to, in these neighborhoods, to collectively invest with us. We identify a property. We know we're going to buy regardless. And then I put out information through social media and through word of mouth and let people know, hey, we're going to buy this property. And, there's no minimums, there's no fees. My mom was the very first person to invest with $500. But the goal here is to teach people about rate of return when you invest, teach them about the home buying process, and also pair them with loan officers and realtors who can put them in a position to buy homes. Many people have been renting for decades in these communities and have nothing to show for it. And so we basically collectively invest. We also educate and employ people from the community to help us on the house. And then in the end, our mission is to sell to someone in the community and create first-time home buyers, thus starting people on the path to generational wealth. And we can change slides. And just want to wrap up by saying, and that was not something that I thought I was going to get into. And when David, I think he was off screen right now, but you mentioned the Norfolk County Council. My first home that I invested in was in our city of Norfolk here in Hampton Roads, Virginia, coincidentally. But it's been a great journey where we've moved from one area in Hampton Roads, Virginia to Richmond and coming back to DC. But I think the foundations from Pivot have taught me a lot. I still have all of my notes from 3 years ago on my laptop. I have all the lessons from Professor Lovegrove, and it's just been a great journey that includes bringing other people with me and being able to reach out to people who I know understand what I've gone through, and that I can always lean on if I ever need it. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Michael.
Thank you, Tony. Really appreciate it, and I'm constantly blown away. You're doing this national work for the National League of Cities, and oh, by the way, I've got a side business that's creating generational wealth, and my mom was our first investor. Joe says, oh, I have a nonprofit, and I've opened the first gym in Ward 8. There's so many things that are being worked on simultaneously. It's just a truly wonderful example of social impact and entrepreneurship, and those things work best when they're not disconnected, and you two model that so incredibly well. We're going to take the slides down now and just open this up for some dialogue and question. I'll grab the first one from chat. James asks, and this I believe is for Professor Lovegrove, do you pre-assess candidates before accepting them into the program, and what does that assessment look like? Professor?
Yeah, absolutely. We do. We have a pretty extensive assessment process that we go through. It starts with an application. The individuals who are interested in being a part of the program are invited to apply over the summer before the program starts in the fall. That application includes a personal statement in which they can explain to us their sort of motivations and reasons for wanting to be in a program like this, tell us a little bit about themselves. Based on the personal statement, we'll invite people in for an interview. And really what we're looking at in the interview is, I mean, obviously, we're not particularly interested in somebody's background. That's the one thing we do a background check. But, obviously, whatever happened in the past is not of any consequence to us. We're looking for people who are ambitious, who are career oriented, and who appear to be kind of emotionally ready and committed to an opportunity like this. So we have an interview process. We then also do an academic assessment. So we have a couple of different academic assessments. I wouldn't say we're not looking to exclude people on the basis of their prior educational background or capabilities, but we are, again, looking for people who are inclined to be in a classroom. So that's a part of it. Final parts of it, we bring everybody in for a day. They work. We do a lot of work in teams, so we're also looking at how people relate to one another. And so we have a day like that. And the final is a sort of, I guess, for lack of a better word, a psychosocial assessment. We do an interview and really try and find out, again, are there any challenges that might interfere with an individual's ability to successfully complete the program. There are people who we've said, come back in 6 months or come back in a year. We would love to have you, but you've got a lot of stuff going on and it's just going to get in the way. And we don't want to bring in people and set them up to fail. We want to bring them in at a point where they're really ready to succeed. And for some people, especially people coming back into the community immediately after incarceration, the reentry challenge, I can't state this strongly enough. The challenges that many of these individuals face are really, really significant. Reuniting family, looking for places to live, just getting sort of getting an ID and a social security card and all these kinds of administrative things. So we want people to have the time and space to get organized. We give them, we direct them to organizations that can help them with that. And then we, admit them into the program at a later date. So I don't know, that was a little bit of a long-winded explanation, but I think the point is we do a lot of the things that people do in other settings when they're evaluating risk, but very much it's sort of a glass half empty, glass half full thing, right? We're not looking to exclude people. We're looking at what are, the reason we're asking about challenges is we're looking at what are the things that might interfere with this person's success and what can we do to eliminate those obstacles? If it feels like it's beyond our capabilities to help, then that's probably somebody will say, come back later. In many cases, we think, we can work with this person. They've got some challenges, but actually this could be a great environment for them. And those are the people we're really looking to support. So, but you're getting a good sense on the screen of, the kinds of people we're looking for, people who are, I guess, first and foremost, see themselves as people who will create opportunities not only for themselves, but for others. That's what we're about. We only have funding for 20 people a year, so we have to be somewhat selective and we have to be a little bit strategic about how we think about, there are many, many more people who are eligible and deserve to be in a program like ours. So we have to be a little bit strategic about how we use those places. We only have one cohort a year. And so we try and we think of it almost as a lever. And be smart about how we use it.
Thank you, Professor. And James, if there's a follow-up there, please feel free to jump in. I'll note one thing. I think the pairing with the employer part of that is also really important. I think Pivot does it really well. We and a number of other employers are brought in to introduce our company to the Pivot Fellows somewhat early in their tenure, so they're getting exposed to employers. And then when it's time to do the hiring, there's almost like a formal match process where we come back in, talk about the company. We then set up interviews with anyone who's interested. The Pivot Fellows rank where they would like to go. The employers rank who they would be interested in hiring. The magic happens, and then we are told who we're paired up with. And I think that process and the intentionality behind it is really important as well, because kind of both parties have bought in before there's ever a placement. And I found that to help a really successful match. Sarah.
Hi, it was a question more for David for the skill mill. Obviously, there's certain kind of areas that you're specialising in terms of the training that you give to your participants. Have you got plans in the future to kind of expand in the areas that you kind of cover? I'm just conscious we're looking at Cubo in particular. Our members, there are certain areas within their teams that they struggle to recruit for, catering being one key area. And I just thought, I don't know whether there's plans to kind of expand what you do in the future, given the success that you've had so far.
Thanks, Sarah. So we've kind of tried to be very focused on the environmental maintenance side of things, that sector, and the green economy is really something which is growing, but also, the kind of tasks that our teams can do within that setting that are, pretty low skilled, don't require enormous, pieces of kit and lots of health and safety requirements, that we can deliver stuff in that sort of setting. So that's kind of what we started with, and we kind of maintained that, although we have diversified a little bit into construction, facilities management, so it's a little bit more diverse, but we wouldn't sort of turn our hand to catering or any other sectors, although there has been, it has been raised before as like, what else could we do, especially trying to tackle the fact that we don't attract an awful lot of young women. It's very male orientated, so we're looking to see how we can bring opportunities to young women in the system, although there are many fewer young women there. We have done some work with the higher education procurement officers, and they were looking to see how skill mill teams could deliver services for universities across the board. That's kind of not really gone very far, but we're very keen to work with universities in that way, deliver services. And because universities are obviously, big employers, and we actually had a really interesting experience where we brought a group of our kids to Cambridge University Students' Union, where they actually took part in the debate in the debating chamber there. So kind of raising aspirations side of things really is really important. Anything we can do to bring young people out of the comfort zone is good, because it really does have a kind of a positive impact. But I think we're going to stick with the environmental maintenance and construction. But we do want to grow nationally, so we want to be responding to the demand that's out there from the youth justice sector to set up teams. That's what we want to do over the next 2 to 3 years.
Fantastic, thank you.
And Sarah, it's such a great question, and we collectively, as this group has come together in kind of that thought leadership space, have actually talked about this quite a bit. And it's so important that Cubo provided this platform today, and we appreciate that, because the more we can get people talking about this, that's where that systemic change starts to happen. There's a lot of really great thought leadership out there around what do we do to end mass incarceration? What do we do about the really abysmal reentry rates that are where they are? That is needed and very important. At the same time, if we found a model where every university could do the 20 pivot fellow model, and every organization could do the level of work with young people that Skill Mill does in a variety of industries, that's when you start to see real change. And so we've been really trying to pull together what are some of those models and who out there is doing this. And we learn more about them every day. So one of the things that we would funnel back is if anyone on the screen or watching this has really good models and successful models or ideas that they want to make sure we're aware of as we're getting more involved in people saying, this is great, but what could we do in our town, our neighborhood, our university? We love to have those models kind of at the ready because there's so much need for that. Let me ask one last question because I know we're getting at time here, but I'm interested a bit, and I'm interested in everyone's perspective on this, on the internal culture elements of second chance hires. Davey, as you have placed young people inside organizations and on construction sites, Professor Lovegrove, same thing with Pivot, Joe and Tony, as you've both employed people and been within settings where you're talking about these issues. What are some of the benefits or challenges kind of culturally within an institutional setting when you're placing a second chance hire? Who'd like to start on that? Nice small question.
I'm happy to jump in. I mean, I wasn't exactly sure where you were directing that question, Michael. I think, it's important to talk about culture because I think, the elephant in the room here is that, a lot of organizations, especially if they haven't engaged in second chance hiring previously, the elephant in the room is there are a lot of, biases, that people have, and we have to sort of confront those biases openly and really get behind them. One of the frustrations is that, and I realize this is an intellectual answer, not an emotional one, but the data suggests, and it is counterintuitive, but a conviction. A conviction, just knowing that someone has a conviction tells you absolutely nothing statistically about whether they will reoffend. And the type of conviction also has no correlation to whether they will reoffend or the type of offense that that individual might commit. So, but everybody is sort of coming into this with the opposite view that the history predicts the future. And so, a lot of what we need to do is just get people to sort of pause and be kind of conscious of that. And by the way, this is not out of line with what is happening with a lot of diversity and inclusion programs inside organizations. One of the barriers is not just about, having more inclusive workplaces is not simply about sort of where you recruit and, the sort of racial profile of who you hire. It really is this kind of, looking inside yourself to figure out what are the behaviors, the beliefs, the things that are, sustaining a certain type of culture that we maybe have to rethink. And so it's tough. I mean, I'll be really honest with you. It's fantastic when you partner with organizations that have already reached a point of sort of self-reflection, as it were, to say, we don't know what the right answer is, but we know that we have to look at some of these beliefs and practices, and we know we have to get a little bit uncomfortable at times, because if we're not uncomfortable, we're probably not doing anything that's significant, right? So, that's the first thing. I think what we then try and do is sort of say, look, we spend a lot of time just trying to say, like, this is just not as scary as it sounds. We get that it sounds scary, but, here are examples of people, here's what works. Here are things that, can be obstacles. Be aware of those things up front, right? The sensitivity. People who've been overlooked, this is not just returning citizens, but people who've been overlooked from employment historically, there are good reasons, systemic reasons why they're not there. And if you don't also look at some of those factors, you're never going to change the dynamic, right? So we do have to be a little bit more, and we've done that in other respects, when we've thought about, women in the workplace and things like that, we've started to make other kinds of accommodations that ultimately benefit everybody in the organization. They don't just benefit that particular group of people. But without those kinds of changes, if you just carry on doing what you do, hoping it'll change, it's not going to change. So I think it's just a sort of a spirit of candor and openness and creating a safe space for people to express their concerns, but a sort of positive attitude around change.
Thanks, Professor. Tony?
Well, all the things Professor just said, but you also asked about the benefits. I mean, statistically, we try to prove the case that even, here federally, WAIOA says that, people with lived experience stay at jobs longer. So that saves companies money. Just the fact, got to get people to listen to that. But one thing is people like us, opening the doors. And, even though we shouldn't have to, but we kind of make people say, oh, it is okay to hire someone with lived experience. And so, that's one of the great things that I mentioned earlier about the network. Some of the challenges is, or one challenge is, people thinking we're monolithic or one person represents everybody. So if they have one bad experience, they say, oh, well, we can't hire anybody who has lived experience, even though the rate of negative incidences might be higher with the general, well, actually statistically is higher with the general public. Is just as biased that is seen. And so we just keep working on breaking down those stereotypes and biases and changing the narrative. And that's actually a class we take through the Georgetown Pivot, is controlling, your own narrative. And so it's more about that, almost more than, the factual things that are in front of people's faces that they don't want to really see. So, people like Joe and myself just keep, knocking down barriers and changing the perceptive.
It's really helpful. Davey or Joe, anything you want to add to that as we wrap up?
Yeah, I'll just add really quickly. I think I mentioned it before. It's just like treating people like human. You know what I'm saying? I think it should be like a training on that with different corporations and businesses and organizations, about just training people that people make mistakes. A lot of us on this call probably did something. We just probably didn't get caught. You know what I'm saying? So everybody in their life broke some type of thing of law, no matter what level it is. So yeah, just treat people like they're human, and bring people that's in. And if you need that, bring people that's already made an example of they had lived experience, and get them involved in your program, and see how they can be relate to the people that you're trying to hire or potential hire and things like that. I think that the relatability, creating that culture, is something great.
Thank you, Joe. Davey? You're on mute, sir.
Microphone off. So yeah, I mean, for us, it's a daily struggle, right? We've got young people employed who themselves hold very, prejudiced views that they're expressing. So we're as I said before, we're trying to introduce them to the norms of behavior and work, and they have been immersed in a certain way of behaving, which we're trying to change. So for our supervisors, it's a constant sort of challenge to challenge that behavior, challenge those views. That's there. And then we've also got examples of placing the team within environments where the young people face themselves, significant prejudice. And one large organization recently, where I'm gonna give you one example, where the one of the employees had said, "You must be very fit because you're constantly being chased by the police." I mean, that's just one comment, but this is just repeated over and over again. So it was just reinforcing the stereotype of, or this label of offender, which obviously we're trying to change. So we had to deal with that. That was a big deal for the organization. I mean, the organization took it very seriously. They responded very well. But the reality is that that's, out there on the ground, and this view that is just banter on a building site, that's how people behave. I mean, these organizations have got a massive tanker to turn to change the views and opinions of people working there. And we're trying to introduce these young people to that environment. And we need to be, as I say, when you're wearing this uniform, you have to be, really beyond reproach. But it's not, it's not as simple as that. It's constant. So as I say, a daily challenge, to get those behaviors to where we need them to be, and also to encourage those other organizations to do the same.
Excellent, David. Thank you all. I know we're at the top of the hour, so Sarah, I'll toss back to you. Thank you so much for the platform and the opportunity to start this really important discussion, and we look forward to continuing it.
No, thank you, Michael, and everybody that's joined us on the call today. It's been really, really interesting to find out about different schemes and how positive an impact it's had on everybody that's been involved in it, and obviously the different ways that people can kind of take and turn their lives around. As I said at the start of the call, I have recorded it, and I'm going to share this with our our members, especially those that weren't able to join us today. We've also got the slides that we will share with our members in due course as well. But thank you so much for giving up your time today. I really appreciate it. And if I do get any questions kind of come back to me subsequently, I will make sure that they are forwarded on to Matt and Poppy accordingly. And we'll hopefully get back to members with feedback. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you all. Enjoy your day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. See ya. Bye-bye.
Bye.